just recently, a couple of weeks ago, Barbados, our neighboring Caribbean country, Barbados, signed an MOU with for an air services agreement with the government of Ghana. So that is going to open airlift between Ghana and Barbados. And of course, Barbados being in the Caribbean, it means that the whole of the Caribbean is going to be able to benefit from this direct air service. So I think we are going to see more travel both ways. Physically, Caribbean people going to see the motherland, and persons from Africa coming to see what their descendants have become, how we've settled in the Caribbean, and how we've grown up. But we do have African-owned businesses in the region. We have right now, actually, this week, it's the African Film Festival here in Trinidad and Tobago. It's actually a girlfriend of mine who directs the festival, and basically it showcases the best of African films here, so that we can get to see ourselves and see our ancestors, see where we came from. We get to see it on film. So there are things that are going on. The connections are there. There are many layers of connections as well. And so I think it bodes very well, even for the physical connection, to be able to not just return to Africa, but have Africans come and discover the Caribbean for themselves. Come and see, how we've evolved here in the Caribbean.
Yeah. I read about the that airline flight. I said, well, wow, this is something really interesting. It really is interesting. Now, let me ask you maybe a kind of intellectual question, just an opinion of yours. Now, if you were to propose a kind of connection that should really exist between Africa and the African diaspora, and in this case, the Caribbean, which area do you think are the most important to concentrate on in networking among ourselves? That is between the Caribbean and African countries.
Well, I think business is probably the place to start. I think having trade, import export of goods, services, that might motivate people to take an additional step, which might be learning the language. Interestingly enough, my alma mater, the University of the West Indies, where I studied, does offer Yoruba classes. So we do have a possibility here to learn the Yoruba language. And so I think that would be a next step. I believe people need to have some form of motivation to learn a language. Otherwise, you don't just go language, well, maybe some people learn languages just for the fun of it. But I think if there's an economic imperative, people will invest the time, because it is an investment, both of time, effort, money, to learn language. But I think one can trigger the next. And coming out of that, I think we can see much more meaningful connections, to come back to that term, where beyond the business side, people will be inspired to really gain a broader understanding, a deeper understanding of where we came from. Because Africa is part of our history, it's part of our story. So I think the language will allow for that deeper understanding.
This is 2022. This is when we are talking of opening up airline direct flight from the Caribbean to Africa. And we want to even call that a progress. Yes, it is a progress. Why is it that it's only now that we are even talking of that? Why was it possible before?
Well, I don't know the intimate details of that agreement, and I can't speak for our political leaders, because let's just be clear. These kind of agreements are signed in a political framework. There has to be some kind of policy in place before agreements like this are signed. But I would say perhaps after that colonial period, we in the Caribbean would have been left with vestiges of let's just say, connections to that other colonial master, not the British, not the French, not the Spanish, but the United States of America, because we have taken part in, we have absorbed so much of that culture through cable television, through the music. It's almost become a substitute culture. And I think we have traditionally had our eyes set on North America rather than looking back, so to speak, at where we came from. That's my opinion. It can be argued. I'm sure there are people who will disagree with me, and that's fine. But my opinion is that we replaced one culture, in our case in Trinidad and Tobago, the British culture under colonial days. We replaced that with American culture because that's who we traded with. And, there's one of our ministers who likes to say, follow the money. If you follow the money, that's our major trade partner. And so there's bound to be some sort of influence being exerted on our traditions, our culture, our way of doing things, because of those ties. So why is it only now that we're talking about airlift between the African continent and the Caribbean? Well, maybe now is the time. Maybe before it just wasn't the time. I don't know. Maybe there are persons who have tried to do this in the past. I don't know for sure. Maybe they've tried and failed. Maybe the conditions just weren't coinciding at the time to make it happen. But for whatever reason it is now, we've managed to take a step forward to actually sign an MOU, which opens the door for real flights between the continent of Africa and what we like to call the continent of the Caribbean. We want to be our own big continent, as small as we are. So let's see how that unfolds. Let's see how that changes the way we interact. I'm certainly very excited about it.
Absolutely. Me too. Me too.